Um, it looks like we're recording, so I think everything is good to go. So welcome everyone to today's early career GeoHealth webinar, where we're going to be talking about navigating GeoHealth careers in NGOs and industry. So today's webinar is inspired by a lot of the kind of ongoing struggles that many have had with getting jobs in academia or in research institutions in the US specifically. And so today we thought we would bring in some well-qualified panelists in NGOs and industry to kind of talk about the potential career paths there and some ways that you can get your foot in the door and start your career there. So first, we're going to start things off with a brief executive briefing for the AGU GeoHealth section by Kai Chen.
Right. Okay, let me do the screen. Thanks. Welcome everyone. So the AGU health section is relatively young, but a growing section. So this is the photo that we took last year during the AGU fall meeting in DC. So you can see there are many people coming, and the GeoHealth section actually is about 7 years old. And we are extremely embedded to Dr. Susan Anneberg from George Washington University, who served as the president during the years from 2023 to 2024. And now we have our current president is Dr. Daniel Tong from George Mason University. I'm Kai Chen, associate professor at Yale University, serving as the current president-elect. Together, Dr. Morgan Goris from Los Alamos National Laboratory is our secretary of the section. So the current executive leadership team is will be serving in the roles until the end of 2026. And we are, it's young but a very vibrant section because we have amazing people working in the subcommittees. These are the chairs and co-chairs from awards committee, the early career researcher committee that is helping organizing this event. Dr. Yun Huang, Dr. Yijun Ma has done a lot of work here. But also we have fantastic communication team, meetings for meeting planning team, the former DEI, but now the Access Engagement Opportunity team, the policy committee. We have new initiative working groups and cross-organization networks that goes beyond the connections just within AGU, but also into other similar organizations. And more importantly, our section, has accompanied with the AGU GeoHealth Journal. The current editor-in-chief is Dr. Helen Nguyen, and we welcome you to consider your important work to publish in GeoHealth Journal. And statistically speaking, you can see the numbers of the current members from only 8 in 2017 to last year. We have more than 700 active members, and the geographical distribution, because this is GeoHealth within the AGUs, understandably most of them are in the US. And if you look at the career stage, look at age distribution, we are indeed a relatively young section with a lot of energetic voices and energetic members. So we welcome you to consider be affiliated with GeoHealth and participate in all the GeoHealth activities. And I'm very proud to say that we actually have a very balanced gender representation. And it's especially for the early career committee, this has been one of the fast growing committee. For example, Dr. Xueying Zhang and Dr. Moise Usmani and Dr. Yijun Ma. Many people on this has been actively engaged in activity like today's event. So thank you to all of them for making this happening. And some of the highlights in the past few months is that every year the AGU GeoHealth session has a joint showcase event with the AMS environmental conferences. So what we do is in that section, we showcase what has been in the AGU 4 meetings for the GeoHealth section and AMS is Board of Environmental Health. So you will see some of the keynote talks and panel discussion. That will be a perfect opportunity for those who might not be able to attend these meetings. And this showcase event is completely free, it's virtual. So we organize this every year, and you can also watch the recording from the AGU YouTube channel. And we also have a fantastic newsletter introducing all the GeoHealth sections. If you want to follow us, do follow us more on these different channels. For example, we are actively on Blue Sky and LinkedIn. Lastly, I want to welcome you to consider attending this year's AGU 2025 meeting. This year will be held in New Orleans, and as many of you have been into New Orleans knows, it's a live music. It has a lot of fun, and do not forget to submit your abstract by the end of July. And this year, it is anticipated to be a hybrid experience because the AGU leadership team anticipates that this year there may be some challenges due to travel or funding. So this will have a hybrid option. So do consider, and I hope to see you guys in New Orleans for the AGU 2025, either in person or online. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kai-Chen, for that amazing presentation and some updates on the GeoHealth committee or the GeoHealth section. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get to our panelists today. So today we have three panelists. We have Nina Domingo, Fiona Lowe, and Nathan Pavlich. All will be speaking about kind of their career paths that have led them into NGOs and industry. And then they'll have about 5 minutes or so to speak on their experiences, and we will save the majority of this webinar for a Q&A session for about 30 minutes at the end here, where the audience can ask any questions that they have to these panelists about getting involved in industry and NGOs for their career path moving forward. And so the first speaker today will be Nina.
Oh, thanks, Bailey. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name's Nina. I'm a research scientist at Amazon. Excited to talk about careers with everyone. But before that, just wanted to give a quick intro on myself. So prior to joining Amazon, I was getting my PhD at the University of Minnesota in the Bioproducts and Biosystems program, where I studied the climate and air quality related health impacts of the US food system. The program was really great in helping me develop my technical skills in life cycle assessment, in environmental, like integrated modeling, in coding and proposal writing. These are all skills that I still use in my job today. The program also helped me develop my network of sustainability-driven professionals, which has been really valuable because a lot of my friends in grad school have become colleagues, and a lot of my professors are still my mentors. So it's been really great keeping that connection throughout the years. The program also helped me get involved with extracurriculars, like leading a seminar series focused on climate and agriculture with the Institute on the Environment. Also allowed me to attend conferences like the UN climate negotiations as a student delegate, which was an amazing learning experience. Outside of school, I tried to focus my time on exploring non-academic career paths that I was curious about. So for example, I volunteered and served as a member for a couple of nonprofits like Twin Cities Food Justice, the Global Shapers Community, and MN350. These experiences were really, really helpful in understanding what a career in the nonprofit space could look like, so I could make a more informed decision on if that's something I wanted to pursue or not. It was also a really great way to network with sustainability professionals outside the academic space. So like one of my coworkers one of my co-volunteers at Global Shapers when I was in grad school is actually now my coworker at Amazon. So it's been really cool maintaining those relationships. I think, depending on the exact space you're in, like for me, the LCA life cycle assessment sustainability space, they tend to be really small. And so like maintaining that network has been really helpful, and engaging with them through these like activities and opportunities has been great. After grad school, I did a postdoc at Yale University in Kai Chen's lab. Honestly, it was a great experience, strengthened my technical skills in coding even more, and integrated modeling. But one of the skills that I honestly found like really, really helpful from being in the Chen lab was I learned a lot about project management. Kai runs his labs almost like a sprint, which is the project management framework that we use in industry. And he was also very good at helping us develop our proposal writing skills, which again in industry is also really helpful because you're constantly having to like sell your work in some capacity. After my postdoc, I took on a role as a research scientist at Amazon. This was in 2022, and I have been here since. I switched to industry for a few reasons. I think I wanted to optimize my career for uh, like measurable impact that I personally could directly measure. And so working at Amazon offered an exciting opportunity to conduct research that directly engages with the research's users or customers. I was also interested in conducting research that was a bit more in the applied space. So in Amazon, my focus is really on sustainability measurement, developing tools that are explicitly designed for carbon measurement and abatement in a corporate setting. So it's been really cool to use the work that I do to track like corporate sustainability goals. So yeah, happy to answer questions on that, but I think Fiona is going to give her intro first.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. I'm gonna share my screen to talk through this. I'm Fiona Lowe. I'm a climate scientist at the Environmental Defense Fund, and I'm gonna just go through like my path, my education path, my job path, and tell you some of the things that I learned on my way to where I am now. And just a caveat is that my last job search was 5 years ago, and that was kind of before AI really took control. And I know that now AI, you have to get through the bots before you can actually even like get an interview. So I can't really give you any advice on that. And of course, the firing of a lot of federal workers, that's makes this a really interesting competitive job search nowadays, which I'm not sure I can speak to either. Anyway, let me just start off and talk. I started off more as a climate scientist. I have a master's in atmospheric science. And my first job was both in sort of an academia government type job. It was with NOAA and the University of Colorado. And I did mostly work in dynamics, and also some work with the map room dealing with people who had questions associated with climate. I thought this was a really great job on paper when I applied for it, but I didn't really enjoy it. I spent a couple years at it. I didn't really, I liked the work, but the people were maybe not so great, particularly like the person I worked with. So I left the job and I was like, oh my goodness, is this really is atmospheric science really in climate what I really want to do? And I took some time off and tried to, I paint, so I tried to sell my paintings. But in the middle of this, actually like the job shared an office space with with people who worked at the National Snow and Ice Data Center, and I, befriended a few of them. And one of the guys said, "Oh, I just got some funding, and I'm really looking for support scientists to help me work the data, and you would be perfect. Do you want the job?" And I was like, "Well, this is a really nice guy. I think the work would be sort of interesting, even though I kind of was hoping to have a few months off." And I said, "Okay, sure. I'll apply for the job." It actually worked out great because it took 6 months for the job to actually for them to write the job description and to advertise and for me to apply and all that stuff. And so I actually got 6 months off, which was perfect. So with this job, I worked in things like Arctic hydrology, the North American monsoon, and snow. And with this job, I'd learned that I loved working with these people, but the topic wasn't really what I was interested in. It's, focuses, like the Senate says, it's like a snow and ice data center. And I was more interested in climate. So that was that. And actually, I then took off a year to travel around the world, but that's not really related career path. But I ended up in Australia, and then I ended up working for the Bureau of Meteorology, which is a government job. And I found that government jobs have very nice stability. But as a result of that, like, scientists really have less flexibility on what they get to work on. And I worked there for a couple of years, and actually wanted to return to the US. So then I came back to Seattle, which is where I got my master's, and I worked at the Northwest Research Associates. So this is actually a for-profit company, but it doesn't really seem like it. It's a science research organization that is owned and run by the PIs. And so even though I was not a PI, I didn't have a PhD, so I wasn't the one like writing grants. What I did was I worked for various scientists that were PIs that had grants and needed support to work on projects. And as a result, I worked on a bunch of different projects, things that I have what I thought I had no expertise on was like coastal dynamics and oceanography and currents and things like that, things that I just learned on the spot. But I had a real good basis. I knew how to do coding. I knew the statistics. I knew the analysis. All of that. I knew how to write models. All of that is useful in doing these projects. And all I had to do was learn a little bit about each new topic. And so having like a sort of, I guess, like data science background, it was actually, it made me very flexible. I could work for almost any scientist. And that was a part-time job because I had a young child at the time, and I was also working a little bit part-time for Cornell. And I got this job because of a friend of a friend. And in fact, a lot of these jobs I've gotten is I've sort of known somebody. So I would say networking is very important in getting a job. And these jobs, because I didn't have a PhD, were great. They were like support scientists, data scientist roles, and that, yeah, which was great. These, as I said before, mostly coding, data manipulation, data downloading, data management, visualization, and analysis was kind of my jobs. And then at that time, then I decided I wanted to go back and get a PhD. I got my PhD at University of Washington in atmospheric sciences. And this is where I started incorporating health into my work. So climate impacts on human health. And after my PhD, I got my PhD in the pandemic, so that was really tough to find a job. Luckily, I had some money left over, and I stayed at the University of Washington in the Center for Health and the Global Environment as a postdoc. And I spent a lot of time during my postdoc looking for jobs. I knew I didn't want to go into academia, and so I just tried to get on every job board there was out there. I was really active on LinkedIn. I was reading a lot of job ads, just applying to many jobs. And there really wasn't any jobs out there that were related to climate and health. And so as a result, I ended up relying on my climate experience to get a job. And so the Environmental Defense Fund was actually advertising for a climate scientist. And I said, okay, I can do that. I applied, and in the interview process, they said, what were you working on? Can you give us a talk on your PhD thesis? And I said, sure. And they said, oh, we have people who work on health in the Environmental Defense Fund, but nobody that actually interacts with the climate team. And so this is great. So I ended up getting the job I wanted, even though the job ad wasn't exactly related to what I was looking for. So now I work on climate and health, and I do about 50% research, about 25% communication, and 25% other stuff. I'm not sure how to classify it, but I do things like, for instance, the legal team is trying to mount a defense on the endangerment finding. That's the finding in the Clean Air Act, which says that greenhouse gases are a threat to public health and public welfare. So I'm helping the legal team come up with a defense for that. I've done things like help produce a curriculum for middle and high school students related to climate change and environmental justice. I'm right now in the middle of developing a workshop to help people understand how to use climate models for future predictions. And part of my job, I would say, I do a lot of things such as I read papers that are way outside my expertise. Right now, I'm looking at potential technologies that could help us mitigate or adapt to climate change. So one of the papers I just read was like paint. You can paint buildings with that can help cool. So that's like chemical engineering or something like that. But I think it's really fun to read things that are not in my expertise. And besides my research, I also spend time with communications. If EDF wants to put out a blog post or social media post and it's related to climate science, I have to vet it before it goes out. Also, if there's for instance, extreme event that's related to climate change and they want somebody to speak on it, an expert to speak on it, I get to do it. Sometimes I'm on camera, sometimes it's just written, but that's part of what I do. And I feel like my job is a lot more applied than academia. And also in the past, when I had been working in academia, I felt like it was a detriment that I had worked on a huge number of different topics. I think in academia, it's good to be the expert and you dive really deep into a subject. But in fact, I was hired for this job because I knew a lot. I had worked on a ton of different projects, and my job is more like it's better for me to know a little bit about a lot of different topics rather than being an expert in one thing. So something that I thought was a weakness ended up being a strength for me. All right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So we will finally move on to Nathan, and then we will get to the question portion of this webinar.
Great. Thanks, Bailey and Nina and Fiona. It's great to hear your paths. So I'm Nathan Pavlovic. I'm lead geospatial data scientist at Sonoma Technology. I've been there with that company for 10 years. And in my role, I use geospatial data science tools to understand air pollution, including wildfire smoke, but also from other sources on human health and the environment. So in that role, I lead our geospatial data science group. And so I lead teams that use tools including GIS, scripting with R and Python primarily, and machine learning and increasingly AI tools to really support both applied science and more pure science in the health effects and environmental impacts of air pollution and air pollution topics more generally. In that role, we're working with university epidemiologists who want to have the best understanding of air pollution exposures that folks have experienced or that the environment has been subjected to, and then we're working with them to provide that information about air pollution and the expert advice on those exposures. So we've worked with folks who study outcomes, including maternal and child health, respiratory outcomes, mental health, and other areas. And also just had a paper published on ozone impacts on trees across the US. So that was exciting. So it's an interesting role because in some sense we're doing research or applied research. In addition to the stuff that gets published, we'll also write reports for variety of non-governmental or governmental entities that need reports that aren't necessarily on one topic or another. Often it's about synthesizing literature or making recommendations that stem from the current understanding of the science. And so it's kind of unique in the sense that it sounds a little bit like I think one of the organizations, Fiona, that you had been talking about, that is we're a private company, but we are often operating somewhat like a research institution, although I think there's some pretty key differences there as well. And I should say that the organization broadly works well beyond. So I'm sort of in a unique corner of the organization, and we also have large groups that support industry, that support government in air quality topics beyond the research area. So anyway, I'm really excited to be talking with you all. My career journey really started with AGU, or it's like my organization. So it's really nice to be speaking with everyone. I just to talk share a little bit about my career path. So coming out of college, I studied biology and global development studies at a liberal arts college in undergrad, and I came out and I worked abroad in a research station, a biological research station for a while, and then moved to a nonprofit focused on environmental issues. And in both of those jobs, they were sort of, first of all, jobs where you were doing a dozen different things on any given day. So I was a research assistant at the research station that I was at. So sometimes I was driving a four-wheeler out to collect samples, and other times I was also the Linux system administrator. So when the internet went out, I had to go into the server tower and sort that out. So and I didn't really have any business doing that. I had the book and I had the terminal and I had to figure it out, but I knew more than anyone else there. So it was a nice sort of learning experience, and I think it kind of exemplifies a skill that's served me really well, I think, throughout my career and in industry, which is that ability to understand a challenge and say, okay, here's what I know and here's what I don't know, and learn as you go. And I think that's something that's been quite useful, and I think probably in the private sector or nonprofit world is especially useful to be able to pick up a new area and run with it. So anyway, in that job at the research station and in the nonprofit that I worked at, I found that geospatial analysis was really the piece that was very exciting to me and had broad applicability across the work that I was doing. And so at that point, I decided to go back to school and earned a master's at the University of Illinois in geography. And I went in really focused on the idea that I wanted to apply geospatial and remote sensing data to environmental challenges. And so I really dug in there, learned R more deeply, learned a lot about GIS, was writing batch jobs on the campus cluster, so I was doing some big data type analyses, and then was using all that to apply to a research question that I had developed with my advisors, focused on the distribution of fire across West Africa and the social and environmental drivers of that. So as I was doing that, I had the opportunity to go to AGU and was presenting a poster. I knew I was going to be needing a job after graduation, and so I looked at who else was in the session and who else was attending the conference. I saw this company that sounded like they did interesting things, and hey, they were at a conference presenting a poster in the same session as me. So I did some research ahead of time, sent an email, said, hey, we're in the same poster session, I'd love to chat. And did that. We had a chance to connect at the conference, and then followed up and went through the formal interview process, and then was hired on with my current company. And really from there I was at an entry level job at that point, doing like data QC, visualization, analysis, those sorts of things, and have just been able to grow that role over my time here into leading proposals and projects, and really getting to do I think work that's very impactful and very exciting. So yeah, so that's really my career path. I think we've got, we could talk more about some of the lessons learned and skills along that path. I'll just mention that I'm in addition to being lead geospatial data scientist at Sonoma Technology, I'm also a board member at a nonprofit called OpenAQ that focuses on making air quality data available to people around the world. And then I'm also co-chair the group on Earth observations, GeoHealth, air quality and health working group. Different GeoHealth than this group, confusingly, but just some examples of contributions that I get to make beyond my primary role. So I'll stop there and hand it back to you, Bailey, with it sounds like we'll have questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you all so much. So I will go ahead, and I have a couple of questions prepared that I will start our panel discussion on, but I would encourage everyone in the audience to start putting your questions into the chat, and we'll start collecting those and giving them to our panelists as well. The first thing that I want to start off with, and some of you have talked a bit about this in your career path, obviously, but I think most people here are from, an academic background, and most of them would be looking to transition into industry or nonprofit work. So what ways can current academics leverage their projects to build favorable skills for industry and NGOs? And even for current postdocs and PhD students, people that are very earlier in their career, what sort of technical or non-technical skills are very important for them to prioritize during their early career stages? And what is the best way for them to go about transitioning fields?
Okay, I'll just jump in. What I use a lot is well, part of my job is technically communications, and so I need to talk with non-scientists, non-experts. I need to like give understandable but pretty clear explanations of like complex scientific terms and ideas. And so that's one thing I hadn't actually worked on much in all my previous jobs that I now use quite a lot at EDF. It's a, but like I feel like all the talks and presentations that I've given and the proposal writing that I've experienced in the past all help me with this part of the communications. And then one thing I really have to keep in mind, though, like all my previous jobs were communicating to another scientist with an expertise in my field, and and now I try and communicate with people who have no expertise and actually try and part of my job is to pique the interest and get people interested in trying to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. And luckily, there's a whole huge communications team at EDF. And so I get to work with them to have they tend to brush up and fix my language and help me make things sound much better, but I still have to provide the science in a manner that they can translate. It can translate so that everybody can understand. And I think Nina had mentioned a bunch of other translatable skills like project management. If you think about like, trying to schedule your committee members to get a date for your defense, or trying to get them to read your thesis, right? That's all part of project management, and so you can think of that as a transferable skill. Writing proposals, it's sort of like marketing. You have to like sell yourself, sell your project, and of course I think coding and knowing how to model and things like that is very important. Knowing statistics for my job anyway, and data analysis. I've just having that background, and I could have applied it to a lot of the different topics, is really, really helpful for me. I'm not sure I answered all the questions. I think Bailey, you had asked a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh yeah,
but,
that was perfect.
Okay.
Does anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I can add to that. I guess my recommendation would be like to think about what type of role you want to pursue. One of the interesting things about climate is as the impacts, I think, become more intense, the need for every type of job role to in some way be influenced by the climate lens like becomes more apparent. So if you want to apply for like a research scientist role, my guess is that you guys are already very well positioned for that type of role. If you want to apply for a different type of role like program management, product management, consulting, you might have to broaden your experience a little bit. Sorry, backing up on the research science thing, I really want to echo like Fiona's comment earlier, like within academia, we're so specialized, but kind of outside that, it really does help to generalize your research knowledge. If you want to switch to a different type of role, I think beyond broadening your research focus, you probably also need to broaden your types of experiences. So, that might mean volunteering at an NGO or doing some consulting work with like local government. Increasingly in the tech space, at least, I'm seeing corporations hire a lot more of like scholars. So that's like academics acting as in-house consultants. If that's your professor, I would ask them if you could get involved with that type of research. But whatever like you're trying to transition to, I would say like try to find experience that mimics that type of work to see if you like it. And so that when you're trying to sell your skills at a later point, you seem less specialized. Also really want to echo Nathan's comment earlier, like corporations are increasingly attending these conferences like AGU, like ISSST, treat them as recruitment events because a lot of the times they are hiring and they're happy to talk to someone who is already in that space.
Great. I'll jump in with a couple of thoughts as well. Yeah, Nina, I think that point is so good, and it's a chance to connect with someone who likely might actually work with you on a regular basis, right? And so that's an opportunity. I think it's kind of a cliche to say, it's about relationships, it's about who you know, but it really is, I think, in the hiring process, a significant leg up if there's someone there who already knows you within the organization, who already knows you, who says, oh yeah, if I could just get so and so on my team, that's really gonna, that's gonna make my work easier. That means we're gonna be able to push this much harder. We're gonna be able to accomplish more things in whatever domain that is. And so I do, yeah, it worked out well in my personal experience, and I think is a pretty good example of how things work. So yeah, so I think the couple other points that I find or that I would suggest when you're thinking about a transition from industry, so from academia to industry, we talked about the sort of learning to learn as a key one. I think that's always important. One thing I think that it can be a transition for some people is at least in our organization, you're often juggling a lot more ongoing things at a given time than you might in academia. And so I think gaining some of the experience that Nina talked about, by finding a chance to consult or contributing to a team or a research project somewhere, that adds to your plate when you're already quite busy in your current role. But I think that ability to juggle is probably going to serve you well as you continue in whatever it is that you do. And then one other thing that we like to say is that tying everything that you do back to the so what, I think becomes especially important when you're doing academic research in a research community. I think it's somewhat easy to think that you're speaking to an audience of folks who sort of know the problems in the field and understand like, oh, they solved that equation. That's amazing. And that makes all of these things possible, right? And I think in industry, you're being hired because you're an expert in a thing that the people you're working with aren't. And so it's a really great skill, and it serves you well in academia too, to be able to distill down the so what of the work, that like, why are we doing this and why is it important? And that then I think also feeds into the final thing that I think can be challenging and important is understanding what's important and what's not important. You do end up time constrained and budget constrained in projects, and so being able to have that sort of sense of, okay, these things are important and we need to get these right, and these things are, I mean, you can chase the academic sort of questions down the road, but at the end of the day, you want an output. You need an answer. Somebody needs to make a decision, and you need the best answer that you can get to within the resources that are available. So I think that's maybe a mind shift that I see in a transition. And so I think finding opportunities to practice those skills now are really great. So it's and just to not to repeat again what Nina said, but building a network, contributing to like either applied research projects or working with a government in your community, a nonprofit in your community on a real world challenge, those kinds of things, I think can really help strengthen those skills and build the experience working with others in a sort of collaborative way that you may do there. So yeah, a few thoughts from my side there.
Could I add something? Yeah, Nathan, I wanted to echo what you said about the so what at the Environmental Defense Fund. We're an environmental advocacy organization, and so as part of the scientists in the organization, they tell us we want your science to be actionable. So whatever results we get from our research, it's got to do something. So maybe it'll help change policy, or it has to be impactful in some way in terms of I'm working on predicting how many heat-related deaths we can save by reducing methane. Because one of the big things for EDF is reducing the amount of methane in the atmosphere. And so I'm supporting that by, by producing something that is concrete that will support why methane needs to be reduced fast. And then one other thing I wanted to add was when I was looking for jobs, again, I was looking for I wasn't finding things that were interesting to me that were like climate and health. And so I just expanded my search, and I found out that the financial sector had a lot of interesting things. They do modeling, and they, do analysis of modeling, all things that I do in my work. But as I said before, the topic is different. It's not, climate, it's not health. But I found that I actually was qualified to apply for a lot of these jobs in finance. But when I had a bunch of interviews, I realized that the job was not for me. So I stepped out of that. And then you can also draw on things that you enjoy. I'm a tennis player, and I applied for a data scientist position, doing statistics on data rankings. I would have loved that job. It would have taken me out of climate and health, but I was very excited. I actually got 2 interviews, so I did manage to get very far. So even I know this is a climate and health group, but I'm just saying that you can expand and use your skills in other ways that could be very helpful. That you have skills for other jobs.
Yeah, thank you all so much. So there's another question that I want to ask, especially before we run out of time today. A lot of our early career committee members and a lot of people in the GeoHealth section are either international students or they are not US citizens, where getting jobs in industry can be a bit challenging, especially now with the kind of question hanging over H-1B visas. So we wanted to ask you all if you have either any experience or advice with the H-1B process, and basically any advice for the people that might be going through that, trying to get into industry.
Yeah, I went through that process, so I definitely have some shared learnings to share. For me, getting a more stable visa or green card situation was very important to me. And so I actually made the decision in my head, I am not going to switch out of academia, which I know is a little bit safer for international students, until I'm more secure. So the pathway I took was self-applying and sponsoring for an EB visa. I think as academics, you are very well positioned to apply and get that. It's a straight path to a green card. Once I got that approval, it was so much easier to job hunt in industry because I didn't need work sponsorship. If you're not willing to wait that long, because it is a bit of a slow process, there are some sectors that I think are more willing to sponsor H-1Bs than others. So tech tends to be a little bit friendlier in sponsoring H-1Bs compared to other industries. So yeah, that's my advice. But H-1B is a lottery. So just know that even if it's faster, there's still that trade-off risk that you're not going to be selected for the lottery.
Do our other panelists, Fiona and Nathan, do you guys have anything to add on this one? If not, that's fine. We can move on.
No, just to say, I mean, people do it. I know several folks who have gone through the process, and I don't think it's easy, but it's possible to work through the H-1B visa process. But again, I mean, Nina has been through it and knows a lot more about it than me, and I think it's probably in the current climate especially important to really understand the very current state of those decisions.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that this will probably be our last question for today, and I want to go to each of you about this. So for those looking to, start developing their network in the NGO and industry sectors, what are some upcoming events that they can look out for? What are some resources that they can use where following this webinar today, they can start, on those first steps to building their network and getting involved?
I can go. I again think that depends on the type of role you're chasing. If it's a research role, I think going to these conferences that if you want to move to corporations are increasingly going to and recruiting at. Also wanted to add, like for those international students, really take advantage of that time you have during OPT and STEM OPT, because that's the most flexibility you're going to have with gaining like diverse job experiences that don't have as much limitations until you secure an H-1B or a green card. So just my suggestion there.
Yeah, I would say use all the networks you have. So I'm not just saying, the obvious ones are like, getting on like LinkedIn and your alumni for whatever school that you graduated in, you could do that. But like whatever your hobbies are, like I said before, I'm in tennis, like I'm on a tennis team. So I just start talking to everybody on my tennis team and tell them what I'm looking for and what kind of job, and pretty soon people will be like, oh, I heard this and this. And then you'll be able to reach a much more diverse range of people. So you can do that at like, wherever you volunteer, or, other sports team or your, church or whatever, right? Like whatever community group or your neighbors. Just start putting the word out. And then once you get a nibble, I would say ask for an informational interview. Like it's not like you're asking for a job, even though you kind of are. But ask for an informational interview and say, I'd like a 20 to 30-minute Zoom call. Can you tell me about your job? What is, and how did you get your job? And what do you do? What skills you use? And then you can start like figuring out, is this person's job what you want to do? And if so, then ask them, like, you can always follow up and say, can I call you again if blah, 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 I move a lot, and they, if they're nice, they'll say yes, and so you can always come back to it. And as an introvert, I found this really hard to do. So I actually set myself like some goals. I said to myself, okay, every week I have to reach out to at least one person. Because you never know when this one person will be helpful. And to set like a goal that was very concrete for me was really helpful. So that's one of my suggestions.
All right. I think with that, if no one else has anything to add, oh, I see we have someone raising their hand. Go ahead.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is me. I just tried to turn on the video. Hi. Thank you so much for the panelists. This is a great resource and information. So I'm working in academia as an assistant professor, early career. I guess many people, as you know, like many people say, like working in academia, you're supposed to be working like 7 days a week. never take a break. I was just curious, could someone say working in industry will be more work-life balance? You get a real weekend. How do you feel your work? And just remind you, we are recording. So yeah, I just want to say, do you feel working in non-academia field with more work-life balance? You get more free time for your family and yourself?
I think yeah, I feel my work-life balance is pretty good. I would say I work 40-ish hours a week. Only caveat is because I work at Amazon, most of my team is in the West Coast. So I do kind of work West Coast hours is the one drawback. Otherwise, yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I would second that. With the caveat that then I get interested in things like I mentioned outside of my direct work responsibilities and end up filling up some time. But and that's helpful, but it's certainly not expected, I would say. So
Yeah, I would also say that I think the work-life balance is slightly better, not in academia, although I also worked very hard while I was in academia to have a work-life balance.
Yeah, and then real quick, Elise.
Hi there. Thanks so much, all of the panelists. I'm curious because Nina, you had mentioned a couple of times sort of start thinking about the role that you're interested in. I think one of the things that I am looking at as I'm looking at towards my next career step is sort of all these different job titles. They mean different things at different companies, and I'm having a lot of calls with people to learn more about what they're doing. But does any of you have any tips on sort of to better understand like what might be a research role, might be more of a sort of a project management role, or like any kind of standardization, or is it just company specific?
At least within the tech industry, the pattern I'm seeing is like if you want to do more technical type of analyses, you'd probably be considered a research scientist or an industry specialist. If you want to do more hands-on type of work, like actual implementation of maybe like carbon abatement programs, you would probably a program manager. If you want to build products, so like if I want to build the new eco-invent, or I want to build automated carbon accounting system, you would probably be more of a product manager. If you want to do more consulting type work, and that's less in-house, but will give you like broader types of experience, consulting might be the way for you. And these consultancies are increasingly building their own like sustainability arms. So also a good opportunity. Those are the 4 types of roles I'm really seeing right now. Supply chain is also very sustainability tied. So if you want to do like optimization type of work, that could be a good avenue too.
Thank you.
Also, because like you, Elise, I had no idea what I was doing and what kind of titles, and I thought it was very specific to the companies. I just would read the job description, and if I could like do half the things on there, I would just, and it looked remotely interesting, I would just apply. And then once I got an interview, then I would like start asking specific questions about what it was. And I also took the interview process and as, do I want a job at that company? It kind of took the pressure off and made me a little less nervous. Felt like I was interviewing them as well as they interviewing me. So that also kind of, that was sort of one of my strategies.
Thank you.
All right, we are at 3 o'clock now. So a couple of last minute things. The GeoHealth for AGU, a lot of these sessions today are getting notifications back. So people should probably have a good idea about now the kind of sessions that are going to be available and submitting their abstracts over the next few weeks. So keep an eye out for that. There are a lot of early career committee members that are hosting certain or are chairs or conveners on certain sessions. So if you want to know if your abstract might be a good fit for those, go ahead and reach out to them. We also have our next early career committee meeting coming up on the first Wednesday of July 2nd. every first Wednesday of every month is our GeoHealth committee calls. So if you're interested and you haven't attended one yet, please go ahead and reach out to one of us and we can provide you with that information. But other than that, unless anyone has any other updates or things to share, I believe that'll be it for today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.